I think it was around November, December 1969 in London. I had just graduated from the London Film School, and I had a strong passion for history and art since I was my secondary school days, high school days in Ghana. So I just decided to visit the British Museum, because British museums are basically source of information about history of different countries, societies, and so on and so forth. So I took a walk to the British Museum, which was not very far from the location of my film school, where my film school was. So when I went there, and I went to the Africa section of the British Museum, I was amazed at what I saw in the African Exhibition Hall. It was a huge, big ceiling with several glass cupboards locked with African art, artifacts, and rare art collections behind locked glass doors. So I went around, and then it suddenly occurred to me that, look, I have just acquired a very powerful skill, which is a tool. As a filmmaker, I can use this skill to maybe, if I can get the permission of the museum authorities, I can try and record. Even these things are behind the glass cupboards and things. I will try and record something. So I decided to set in motion the application to apply to the museum authorities to ask permission whether they will allow me to film. I wasn't very optimistic, because there was so much security cameras around all over. So I was surprised when they responded to my application. See, so what I did was that I decided that I have to make an impression on, because it was an interview. I was going to be interviewed. So I went out to the West End of London and rented a three-piece suit, a three-piece suit, and including the waistcoat and the watch inside there. And so when the day of the interview arrived, I went up and I met the curator of the museum. His name was William Fagg. William Fagg, I did some research before I met him. He was a district colonial officer in Nigeria during the British colonial days. So when I entered his office and he saw me, he immediately got up from his chair to greet me. And I know by body language that if somebody gets up to greet you, then it's a sign of acceptance, because I was looking like an African gentleman, the way I was dressed. I looked safe, I didn't look threatening. So he welcomed me and he gave me a seat and said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, I'm here to promote you. I would like to do something to promote what you and your establishment have done to preserve African art, which if it hadn't been for you, all these things would have disappeared. So I'm here to make a documentary. I want to do a film about you, to glorify you and all that stuff." So I think that, I threw a little bone, like you threw a bone to a dog, and I think he grabbed it. And he liked that, see. So he said to me, I said, "I'm very impressed by what I saw at your exhibition hall." Then I was amazed when he said, "Oh, what you saw in the exhibition hall was only 2% of what we have in our collection. 2% what was in the exhibition. or was only 2%. So I said, well, I'm interested to find out more. Then he took me behind his office. We walked through a door, and he opened the door, and we went down a spiral stairway, almost about 50 feet, gradually, slowly, on into the basement of the museum. And when we hit the basement, I was overwhelmed because it was a huge vault with so many security officers moving around, electric cars, electric trolleys, moving boxes here. It was like a complete city within a city. I mean, it was like something below, the museum. And so I said, look, I would like to come back in a few days' time to come and record this amazing collection. Anyway, so he said, well, it was going to cost you some money, and the conditions that I had to accept before I was allowed to bring in a crew and a camera was that I was going to start work at 9 a.m. in the morning and finish at 5 p.m. So in actual fact, the film was shot in one day. And despite the fact that there were so many vaults, there are so many possibilities, we had to rush like mad from one location to the next, and we managed to, because of the time, and the security officers were with us all the time. And in fact, the security officers at one point insisted that they wanted to be in front of the camera, and I refused. I said, no, this is about the artifacts and our camera, so we don't want any security officers there. Anyway, I had to pay the museum authorities close to 500 pounds. 500 pounds. I went back in 1970. See, I saw the visit. I was there in 1969, and I went back in 1970, around the winter time, to shoot the film. So the film was shot in one day, and it was very hectic, very, very hectic. So once I grabbed the stuff, I said, well, that's it. So sometime in the middle of 1970, I was able, it was very difficult to edit the film because I didn't have editing facilities. And I was very, very, very lucky. I was introduced to a film collective, a British film collective, which was run by a German called Schlager Lamche. And he was a very progressive person, and he saw the rushes, and he said, look, you can have my editing suite. So they donated free editing facilities. That was the reason why I was able to make the film, because without the editing facilities, I would not have been able to make the film. So I have a lot of, I owe a lot to them. And so finally the film was made, and it was premiered at the Africa Center in London. I invited the British Museum authorities to come to the screening. I gave them a front seat, and they refused to sit in the front. They decided to sit at the back. So when they went to the back, and when the film started, I noticed that the moment the commentary started, they got up and put on their coats and disappeared from the hall. Now, the Africa Center director was a British woman at that time, and she invited experts from the University of Oxford, Cambridge, London on African art, history, society, and stuff like that. So the place was packed with about 120 people, including African students who were in England at that time. And after the lights came on, I was given a standing ovation, and it was remarkable. So that was my experience, and in making the film, and the rest is history. And I was not able to distribute the film because it was on celluloid. And in those days, to distribute a celluloid film which was on a reel, it was not easy, unless you have a projector that you can take to the location and to show the film. So the film was only shown on 1 or 2 occasions. And then for more than 40 years, the film was, lying on my shelf. And I moved on to do other things. I came back to Ghana and stuff like that. And I was employed at the University of Ghana. And I was able to develop a department known as a Media Research Unit to undertake research and documentation on African history. So I was in the university until I retired, about 10 years ago. But almost 10 years ago, I decided to convert the film from cellular to video. So I converted it from cellular to video just in case. Then last year, when George Floyd was murdered, and then the Black Lives Matter movement, erupted, my son, who was in the US, called me and said, "Look, Dad, where is that film? I need a film. Let me have your film." There is a film festival in the US called the Black Star Film Festival, and I've told them about the film, and everybody wants the film. So quickly, I uploaded the film to him. And at the Black Star Film Festival, the Paris, organizers of the Paris Short Film Festival were at this festival, but the film was 50 years old, see? So I didn't think it was going to be in competition. I just thought it was going to be an information film. But surprisingly for me, the Paris organizers of the festival entered the film in competition together with other films that were made only a year ago. And I woke up one morning and I got the news that I had won the best short documentary at the Paris 2020 Film Festival. It was surreal. I couldn't believe it. And they called me personally to congratulate me and said they were very happy that they were able to enter the film in the festival. The rest is history.
But
from then on,
history.
See, I was getting calls from everywhere, from Japan, from here and there. We want to talk to you and stuff like that. So, I mean, the film is now taking a walk, and it was because of the Black Lives Matter movement. That's what was a turning point. Otherwise, it would still be lying on my shelf, because I converted it to video and I use this. So I saved the video on a Betacam at that time, and it was just there, and then suddenly it's all over.
The context change, the media change, because now it's easier to distribute, it's easier to watch, it's easier to share. So
of course.
And,
of course.
And not only big museums or institutions have the materiality to show those videos or to watch them.
Right. And so we started an organization called AfriTeam, the Association for the Restitution and Return of African Artistic Treasures in the European, British, and American Museums. So we have an organization now which is being supported by the Ministry of Culture, and we are trying to, and UNESCO also. What was interesting was that after the Paris Festival, the UNESCO director in Ghana organized a Zoom conference with us, and we screened the film. So UNESCO was really excited because in 1970, when I was making the film, UNESCO was also putting together its convention, the 1970 UNESCO Convention on the return and, UNESCO Convention on return and restitution of artifacts taken from, foreign African countries. So the interesting coincidence is that at the same time, the year I was making the film, UNESCO was also putting together a convention against the stealing and the smuggling of African artifacts, and etc. to Europe and etc. So UNESCO is celebrating 50 years as I'm celebrating also 50 years of You Hide Me. So on the 26th of this month, there's a big UNESCO Zoom conference for all of Africa. All the African countries will be at the Zoom conference, and I will be there also with you, Hide Me.